On a stormy evening, a grocery clerk risked her life to save a small girl from an oncoming truck. No reward was asked for, only quiet words to calm the child's shaking. When the girl's wealthy father tried to express his gratitude, she refused, silently. Neither of them could have known that this single act of kindness would form a connection that would alter all their lives forever. The rain pounded that evening, heavy drops bouncing off the pavement, the wind making the umbrellas struggle in the hands of passers-by. Simone wrapped her jacket tightly around herself, trying to shield against the cold, soaked from her long shift at the grocery store. She was already exhausted, the last few hours spent serving customers who complained over the smallest inconveniences. The thought of the long walk home in the worsening storm made her stomach twist, but there was nothing else to do. As she walked, lost in thought, a small figure darted into the street. Her heart skipped a beat. A little girl, no older than 7, was running, her small body a blur against the downpour. Simone froze for a moment, panic rising in her chest, and then she saw it. Headlights, glaring down at the child from the speeding truck. The tires screeched against the slick road, but it was clear that there wasn't enough time. Without thinking, Simone dropped her grocery bag and sprinted forward, splashing through the puddles. She reached the girl just as the truck came to a halt, her arms wrapping around the child's fragile body. They tumbled into a shallow pool of water at the side of the road, both gasping for air. Simone's pulse raced as she held the trembling child tightly. Her body ached, the shock of the moment still rattling her, but the little girl's safety was all that mattered now. The girl clung to Simone, her small hands gripping her soaked uniform, her face pale with fear. The sound of the truck's horn blared in the background, but Simone barely heard it, focusing only on the child in her arms. "You're safe," she whispered, her voice shaking, but steady. "You're okay now." The words were meant to comfort, even if she wasn't sure they'd do any good. A crowd began to gather quickly, umbrellas popping open, people rushing to help. An elderly man approached, his face creased with worry, kneeling beside them. "Is she all right?" he asked gently. A young mother, clutching a thick blanket, moved forward, draping it around the pair for warmth. "This will help," she said softly. Another person called out for medical help. The crowd, filled with concern, buzzed with voices offering aid, reassuring the girl, watching her closely. Despite the cold, Simone felt a warmth from the crowd's kindness, reminded that people still cared for one another in times of need. She had done what any person would have, but it felt like more than just an accident. It felt like a moment that had changed everything. The girl's voice broke through the noise. "She saved me, Daddy." It was a small whisper, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened in those few seconds. The girl's father, Malcolm Jameson, appeared through the crowd, his coat drenched, eyes wild with panic. He scooped his daughter up, holding her tightly. He didn't look at Simone immediately. His focus was on the girl, his own breath coming in sharp gasps. Malcolm was still reeling, barely able to process how close he had come to losing his only child. Then his eyes met Simone's, and he stopped, his throat tightening with gratitude and disbelief. Simone stood in the rain, still drenched and shaken. She could feel the intensity of Malcolm's gaze, the raw emotion of a father who had come so close to losing everything. The elderly man who had first come to help gave Malcolm a gentle, but firm, nudge. "This young lady is a hero," he said, voice trembling with sincerity. She acted without a second thought. Simone shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't used to being called a hero. She was just someone who had seen a child in danger and done what she hoped anyone would do. She gave the girl one last reassuring squeeze, feeling her trembling slowly calm, before she stood and began to step back. The blanket around her shoulders slipped off, but she didn't stop to grab it. Her groceries were scattered in the puddles, but a few items were still salvageable. "I'm just glad she's okay," Simone said softly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline that still pumped through her veins. "That's all that matters." Malcolm still stood there, holding his daughter close, as if he couldn't quite let go. His lips parted, trying to find the right words, but none seemed to fit. The crowd continued to gather, murmuring, but Simone could see the hesitation in his eyes. She knew he wanted to thank her, to offer something for what she had done, but she didn't want that. Before Malcolm could speak, Simone had already started to walk away, her shoes squelching with every step. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The moment was enough. The girl was safe. That was all she had hoped for. The storm was still raging as she made her way down the sidewalk, head down against the wind and rain. The world felt heavier, but there was a quiet sense of satisfaction in her chest. She hadn't done this for recognition. She hadn't done it for anything other than the need to act. But as she walked away, something tugged at her heart. She knew it wouldn't be the last time she thought about that moment. It wouldn't be the last time she thought about Malcolm and his daughter. Malcolm stood in the rain, holding his daughter, watching Simone's figure disappear into the storm. He didn't know what to say, but his heart was full. His daughter was in his arms, safe and sound, and it was all thanks to the woman who had stepped into the path of danger without hesitation. The elderly woman who had spoken earlier still stood beside him, shaking her head in awe. "Angels walk among us," she murmured, looking in Simone's direction. "Some people are put here for a reason." The crowd began to disperse, murmuring their thanks and relief as the danger passed. The truck driver, shaken but relieved, exchanged insurance details with Malcolm before carefully driving off. Yet, despite the safety of the moment, Malcolm's mind kept drifting back to Simone. He couldn't shake the image of her walking away, soaked to the bone, not asking for anything in return. As he and his daughter drove home, the storm still raging outside, Malcolm's thoughts kept turning over one question. How could he ever truly thank her? Later that night, long after the storm had passed, Malcolm sat in his study, Julie asleep upstairs. The rain continued to tap softly against the windows. His thoughts were consumed by Simone, the woman who had risked her life without a second thought for his daughter. He couldn't stop thinking about her quiet strength, the way she had just acted, with no regard for herself. He opened his laptop, his fingers moving with practiced ease. He had to find her. He knew he had to, if only to express his gratitude properly. It took only minutes to find her name. Simone Carter, 34, grocery store clerk. The search revealed little else. No deep public records. Just an ordinary woman with a life as unremarkable as his own. He sat back, the weight of the discovery heavy on his chest. She was not someone famous, not someone with a name that people would recognize. She was just a woman, quietly living her life in a way that, it seemed, didn't seek the spotlight. But she had made all the difference that day. His eyes lingered on the screen, the name Simone Carter burning into his mind. He thought of how the gratitude had been stuck in his throat, how he hadn't been able to thank her in the moment. He had to fix that. He couldn't let this moment slip away without expressing what she had done for him, and for Julie. The next morning, the storm was nothing more than a memory, the streets glistening with the residue of rain. Simone woke early to the sound of her old heater sputtering in the background. The apartment was cold, a damp chill still lingering in the air from the storm that had raged the night before. She stretched slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion in her body. Her eyes landed on the small stack of unpaid bills on the table, a reminder of how difficult things had become. She walked quietly to the next room, where her mother sat in a chair, coughing softly. Simone set a glass of water on the table beside her mother and gave her a tired smile. Her mother's eyes sparkled with warmth, but Simone could see the weariness there too. She was doing what she could, just as she always had, but the strain was evident. Simone quickly brushed aside the worry and got ready for another day. She couldn't afford to let herself slip into despair. She tied on her faded supermarket polo, tucking the worn notebook filled with grocery lists and reminders into her bag. Once, that same notebook had held law case notes, dreams of a future in law that had slipped away when her mother fell ill. With a quiet sigh, she left the apartment, stepping out into the morning with nothing but determination. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the life she was living. She boarded the bus, heading toward her shift at the grocery store, the weight of the day's routine already settling on her shoulders. Inside the supermarket, the fluorescent lights buzzed, the hum of cash registers and the clatter of carts filling the air. Simone moved through the aisles, restocking shelves, answering questions, greeting regulars with the same patient smile she wore every day. The storm from the previous night felt distant, but it was still with her in the quiet moments, in the flashes of fear that would return when she remembered the little girl's trembling voice. Around midday, while wiping her hands on her apron, Simone noticed a man standing at the far end of her aisle. He looked out of place among the discount signs and rows of canned goods. His presence was striking. His tailored suit, a sharp contrast to the mundane surroundings, caught her attention immediately. As he walked toward her, Simone felt her heart skip a beat. It was Malcolm, the girl's father. He held out an envelope in his hand, his face drawn from the strain of the past 24 hours. He began, but Simone interrupted him before he could say more. "You don't need to do that," she said softly but firmly, her eyes steady as she looked at him. "What happened yesterday, it wasn't about money." Malcolm blinked, clearly surprised. His eyes softened with both gratitude and the weight of unspoken words. He swallowed, clearly unsure of what to say next. The crowd of shoppers around them seemed to shrink, their presence fading into the background as the exchange hung in the air. "I once studied law," Simone continued, her voice quieter now. "I wanted to stand up for kids who don't have a voice. But when my mom got sick, I had to leave school to care for her." She touched her apron lightly, a faint sadness in her eyes. "I'm here now because this is what I can do." Malcolm absorbed her words in silence. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time, not just as the woman who saved his daughter, but as a person who carried her own story, her own struggles. He lowered the envelope, swallowing hard. "I didn't know how to thank you yesterday," he said quietly. "I still don't have the words." Simone met his gaze, her expression steady but kind. "I don't need your thanks," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Just make sure your little girl never feels alone. That's all the thanks I need." There was a long pause. The hum of the store, the beep of registers, the shuffle of customers. Everything returned to its usual rhythm around them. Malcolm's eyes never left hers, but he understood now. His mouth twitched as if to speak, but he simply nodded. He slid the envelope back into his jacket pocket. "I understand," he said, his voice rough but sincere. It wasn't much, but it was honest. Simone nodded and turned back to her work, resuming her task of restocking the shelves. The moment had passed, but it lingered, filling the air between them. Malcolm stepped back, but the weight of the exchange stayed with him, as if something important had shifted, something that neither of them had fully understood yet. Later that evening, as rain drummed lightly against the windows, Malcolm sat in his study. Julie was asleep upstairs, her soft breathing the only sound in the house. He opened his laptop again, the screen glowing faintly in the dim room. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Simone earlier that day. He could still hear her words. "Just make sure your little girl never feels alone. That's all the thanks I need." He stared at her name on the screen once more, Simone Carter. He leaned back in his chair, trying to imagine her life. The grocery store clerk with dreams she had put aside, doing what she could for her family. But that was just part of the picture, wasn't it? He couldn't help but wonder about the woman who had stepped in front of the truck to save his daughter. There had to be more to her story. Malcolm ran a search for her again, pulling up the sparse information about her, her old dreams of law school, and the stark reality of her current life. He found no scandal, no deep public records, just the quiet details of someone who had lived in the shadows of her own potential. For a moment, he sat there, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude mixed with a deep sense of guilt. What can I do for her? He thought. What can I possibly give her in return? His phone buzzed, a message from his sister reminding him about the upcoming Lightkeepers Festival. It was the annual event in town, a community gathering that had become even more significant this year. It was the first since Emily's passing, and people expected Malcolm to speak, to assure the town that despite everything, he was holding up. The festival was meant to be a beacon of light for the community, but Malcolm was struggling to find his own way through the darkness. As he pondered his next steps, the memory of Simone's quiet dignity resurfaced. She had made a lasting impact on him, not just by saving his daughter, but by the way she had turned down his offer of money, the way she had simply asked him to make sure Julie never felt alone. He could do that, and more. Maybe, just maybe, he could offer her something that wasn't a token of thanks, but something that would honor her quietly, with dignity. The next morning, the sun broke through the remnants of the storm. The air was fresh, the streets slick with the last traces of rain. Simone woke early, the chill in the apartment still clinging to her bones. The old heater rattled in the corner, but it did little to warm the room. She knew that another long day awaited her, the monotony of restocking shelves and ringing up customers. But as she prepared to leave for work, something shifted within her. The events of the previous night, of holding the little girl in her arms, still lingered in her heart. The gratitude in Malcolm's eyes had been enough, more than enough. She wasn't expecting anything in return. She didn't want anything. She had done what anyone would have done in that moment. And yet, a part of her wondered what might have come of that single act of kindness. As she left for the bus stop, she pushed the thought away. Life was hard, but she had survived this long, and she would continue. But the moment with Malcolm and Julie, the bond that had formed out of sheer necessity, stayed with her. Perhaps it was just a fleeting connection. Or perhaps, she thought, there was something more in it. In the grocery store that afternoon, things felt routine, the noise of carts and the constant beeping of registers dulling her senses. She was almost lost in the rhythm of it when she noticed him again. Malcolm. This time, there was no envelope in his hand. Instead, he stood at the end of her aisle, waiting for her to look up. When their eyes met, he didn't speak immediately. There was a stillness in the air, an unspoken understanding between them. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the days that had passed since the storm. "Simone," he said softly, "I've been thinking about what you said, about how you wanted to help children. I want to talk to you about something." Simone blinked, surprised by the earnestness in his voice. "What is it?" she asked, her voice cautious but curious. "I've been working on something," Malcolm began, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation. "A program for kids, reading, safety workshops, a place where they feel heard. I can help make it happen, but I'd want you to lead it. Not as a favor to me, but as your own work." Simone's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined something like this. She had put her dreams aside long ago, resigning herself to the life she had. But the thought of doing something that mattered, of giving kids a voice, stirred something deep inside her. "I can't leave my job," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't want to be a symbol. I'm not that person." "I understand," Malcolm said, his voice soft but insistent. "This wouldn't be about recognition. It would be about giving back. Giving these kids something they deserve. You don't have to leave your job, but we could start small, at the community center, just a few hours a week. It's not about money. It's about making a difference." Simone stood there, processing his words. She had never thought she would have the chance to do something like this. But could she? Could she step back into the life she had once dreamed of, without losing everything she had worked for? "Why me?" she asked quietly, her gaze steady. "Because you've already shown what kind of person you are," Malcolm replied, his voice warm. "Because you didn't hesitate when it counted. Because I believe you have the power to change lives." Simone's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at the clock on the wall. The noise of the store, the hum of customers around them, felt like it was fading away. For a moment, it was just the two of them. Two people, connected by a moment of fate, standing on the edge of something neither of them had expected. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice steady but unsure. "But I can't promise anything." Malcolm nodded, his face soft with understanding. "Take your time," he said, "but I'll be here if you want to talk more." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Simone standing alone in the aisle. The noise of the store returned, but the weight of the moment lingered, a possibility hanging in the air. That night, as she sat down to a quiet dinner with her mother, Simone found herself thinking of the offer again. Was this her chance to do something more? To give herself a chance to finally become the woman she had always wanted to be? Only time would tell.